Thank you, Ayu. So I will discuss how to use central bank digital currencies across border. And as Ayu mentioned, it is based on some practical experimentations that we've done at the Innovation Hub. We don't have a lot of time, so let's get going. So the first question is why? The simple answer is that cross-border payments are not great. They are slower, less transparent, more expensive than domestic payments, and the G20, the FSB, the CPMI, and others are working hard to close those gaps. For those of you that are intimately familiar with the CPMI FSB work program, the Innovation Hub is really focused on two of these building blocks. One is on new multilateral platforms for cross-border payments. This is the Project Nexus that Cecilia referenced in the first session, and then how to factor in international dimension into CBDC designs. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. What are CBDCs? We just had two great panels discussing CBDCs. So rather than adding more stuff, let me try and simplify. I actually believe that CBDCs can be distilled, I'm an economist by the way, can be distilled down to a single mathematical equation. Have I gone mad? Perhaps. Let's see. So the right-hand side is basically short for making M0 great again. Okay, so this is base money. I guess there's a bunch of economists in the room. And as was mentioned in the governors panel, recall that base money today is cash plus reserves. So those are balances that central banks, commercial banks hold at the central bank. But I think the best example why the current versions of base money are not fit for purpose is really cash. And I was in Copenhagen over the weekend, and seeing somebody pay in cash there is as rare as seeing a fish on a bicycle. And you have to remember that Copenhagen is on the sea, and there's lots of bicycles there. And actually, kind of interesting, moreover, the central bank recently warned citizens not to take cash or banknotes abroad, as it's increasingly difficult to exchange Danish kroner banknotes abroad. So I think cash is going to slowly disappear. So the question is, how will base money look in the future? And as was already discussed, I think the BIS vision is that the base money in the future will be superior technological representations of M0 in the form of retail and wholesale CBDC. And the question for the BIS Innovation Hub is then, how can we use these new components to make cross-border payments great? And so let's have a look at what we have been doing. So here I've taken the 12 or so CBDC projects that the BIS Innovation Hub has been running, and you can see that they've been equally split between retail and wholesale CBDC. The black ones are the ones that are completed, the gray ones are the ones that are in flight, and they're also almost evenly split between domestic and cross-border. But it's clear that most of the projects are either domestic retail or cross-border and wholesale. And so what we'll focus on in the rest of this presentation are the three completed wholesale cross-border CBDC projects. And so I would say that this is Jura, Dunbar, and Enbridge. I think they were already mentioned, and they were all like major undertakings. And today I won't have time to get into all the lessons learned for the three reports, but you are in luck because last year we actually wrote a separate report that's, contrast and compare all the lessons learned from the three experiments. And recently, this very esteemed Journal of Payment Strategy and System published an updated version of this article. But let me try just to highlight some very key facts of how the experiments were similar, and then I'll also talk about how they differed. So all experiments built a prototype of a common platform. So rather than actually trying to interconnect individual platforms. And they were all based on distributed ledger technology. I think the lesson is that DLT offers a lot of flexibility in design and also programmability, as we heard. And all the projects actually allowed something that is a little bit innovative, was that it allowed foreign entities without a physical presence in a jurisdiction to hold and transfer the CBDC. Very few central banks actually allow that today within their RTGS system. And then they all tested payments and payment versus payment use cases. How did they differ? Well, in many ways, here are just a few. The number of currencies they involved, Jura was Euro, Swiss francs, and Dunbar and Enbridge each involved more, actually 4 currencies. They were also different in the type of CBDC that was available for participants. In Jura, the CBDC was only available intraday, whereas both in Dunbar and Enbridge, there was the option to actually hold the CBDC overnight. And then we come to a favorite central bank word, which is control. So there was different level of controls in the different platforms. A very interesting one was Dunbar, where so-called local sponsor banks would actually be asked to do the AML or other regulatory checks. Okay, so even though it was a foreign entity maybe transferring the KYC, the AML, so on and so forth, were actually with a local bank. And in Jura, there was another way. We introduced something, it was actually a private sector innovation. We introduced something called sub-networks and dual notary signing. You should read all about it in the report, but that was actually something that really gave the participating central banks the control that they needed to have in terms of access and transfers of their currency. In terms of the operator, Jura envisioned that the operator would be a private entity, whereas Dunbar and Enbridge more relied or thought about it as being run by the central bank. And I think one of the reasons was that Jura also included digital assets, which at least in many jurisdictions now is also issued onto private CSD or central securities depositories. So these are some of the ways that the experiments were different, and I think we learned a lot also just by being in different regions of the world. So the key lessons learned. We like to say that a great innovation is something that is desirable, feasible, and viable. So if central banks were to issue wholesale CBDC, I definitely think a cross-border platform would be highly desirable. I think we have demonstrated through the 3 experiments, yes, it is feasible to build something like that. I think we believe that a common DLT platform, or especially a common platform, just has more upside. As was just discussed, governance and control are just key elements. Something like the location of nodes or the cloud, data protection, access, so on and so forth are really important issues. And then, as I already mentioned, are you going to give access to foreign entities? I think that's a real game changer if you really want to make cross-border payments smooth and easy. As was discussed in the previous panel, regulatory and legal requirements, just difficult. We tried, but it's just difficult. Scalability and resilience, as was also discussed in the previous panel, there we just need further testing. But the key thing that we didn't really have a chance to investigate, and which is still for the future, is really, are these platforms going to be viable? And I think, you know, there's this American movie where they say, build it and they will come, and maybe, but I think that's too little to hope for that. So I think there's still more work to be done in that area. Finally, let me turn to the future. I like to say that in the Innovation Hub, we pioneer. So we look at what is on the horizon and sometimes even what is beyond the horizon. Unfortunately, the governors have already stolen my thunder, so I was going to talk to you about the work that we are doing on automated market makers, okay? So this is really where we try and take technologies that has been developed in the area of DeFi and combining that with CBDCs or wholesale CBDC. So we have a joint center project that's called Project Mariana, where we're trying to build something like that, where we're basically thinking in a world where central banks have issued wholesale CBDC in a tokenized form, how would you do foreign exchange trade and safe and efficient settlement? And so this is where we are basically taking this concept from DeFi, where this is how you get from one coin to another coin in this world. So, but more to come. The project is probably going to be finished sometime around summertime in the Northern Hemisphere, so you could look forward to that. With 9 seconds left, let me leave you with this cartoon. I think it's true. Central bank digital currencies are here to stay. I don't know who the guy in the window is, whether that's a central bank governor or somebody else. But thank you very much.